ماذا لو أن الكفاءات الجزائرية من كافة أنحاء العالم تجتمع معاً؟ ماذا لو أن هذه الأدمغة بمختلف تخصصاتها تتكاثف لتطوير التعليم والبحث العلمي للنهوض بالجزائر في مختلف المجالات؟ هل تعتقد أن هذا مستحيل؟ أبداً، فالحلم يتحول إلى حقيقة من خلال الشبكة العالمية للعلماء الجزائريين إيناس. رغم أن إيناس هي مؤسسة غير ربحية وتعتمد فقط على تبرعات الأفراد، إلا أنها استطاعت أن تبني جسوراً من التعاون وتبادل الخبرات بين أبناء وطننا الحبيب من الداخل ومن مختلف بلدان العالم، ساعية لصقل المهارات واحتواء المواهب وتبادل الخبرات وإيصال التجارب النافعة لخدمة الوطن.
Okay, Assalamu alaikum. مساء الخير عليكم ومرحبا بكم معنا in a new webinar of the webinar series Earthquake Hazard Mitigation. This is Mohammed Amrouche. I'm the project leader and the initiator of this webinar series. And today we are very honored and very pleased to have one of the most prominent seismologists and earthquake engineer professors, Algerian professors, Dr. and Professor Djillali Benouar. Bonsoir, Professor. Thank you very much for accepting our request.
Merci beaucoup pour l'invitation.
Merci. Donc, I will introduce our keynote speaker today briefly before starting the webinar. Dr. Djillali Benouar is a professor of earthquake engineering and disaster risk management at the University of Science and Technology Houari Boumediene, USTHB in Algeria, and the founding member of the Algerian Academy of Science and Technology, AAST. He obtained his PhD at Imperial College London, a pioneer university in the UK, and a master's degree at Stanford University, California in USA, and did his postdoctoral studies at the University of Tokyo in Japan. Professor Benouar is editor-in-chief of the Oxford Research Encyclopedia Natural Hazard Science and received 2 international awards for his research work from the United Nations Education, Scientific and Cultural Organization and the Thomson Reuters. Professor Benouar has published 45 publications in internationally reputed journals and has over 100 papers in international conferences. He's also a member of the Integrated Research of Disaster Risk IRDR science community and then member of the Algerian Hazard Network. And today, Professor Benouar is going to share with us a very important topic for Algeria, natural hazard governance in Algeria. Professor Benouar, please go ahead. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. First of all, thank you for the invitation. I am very honored to have this space to talk about my country, especially for natural hazard governance in Algeria, which is a subject of actuality, and the government and as the people are very interested in reducing the disaster risk. This is very important today, and I will start by the content, what I'm going to present. I'm going to present an introduction of the subject, a geographical setting of Algeria, very short, risk profile, evolution of natural hazard governance, and earthquakes and flood disasters as policy triggers, implementation of the national hazard governance. I'm going to talk about the main research organizations supporting the hazard governance, and at the end, I will conclude. First of all, concerning we know that today natural hazard governance has become complicated, not only in Algeria, but all over the world. Developed and underdeveloped countries or developing countries. This is because many recent disasters had the biggest impact in urban areas with a large concentration of people heavily dependent on infrastructures and services. This is the modern life. Everything is connected, interconnected, dependent and interdependent, that will make the governments complicated and sophisticated. Risk governance for natural hazards is one of the most complex challenges to governments, to scientists, and practitioners because of the uncertainties we have in the models, the dependencies of the services, and also interdependencies of the drivers of vulnerabilities and disaster risk, particularly in developing countries. Today is a big challenge for science and technology. Despite the progress of science and technology concerning this disaster risk reduction, with the smartphone, with the artificial intelligence, humanity is still suffering the disasters, and particularly from earthquakes, flooding, and also the effect of the climate change. Then we should find something the community should find, international community should think more about how to reduce the disaster risk in all the countries. Algeria knows very well the importance of disaster management, as it has suffered from several destructive natural hazards and learned hard lessons. For sure, Algeria has learned the lessons. Thousands have died as a result of devastating earthquakes, floods, mudslides, and other disasters during all these years, especially Algeria. Why? Because the development is very rapid, a rapid development, and sometimes not planned urbanization and not planned, we don't plan because everything is going very fast and the investment are going fast, but we have to protect our investment because this is a lot of money put in the investment for the development of Algeria. For the Algerian commitment, the Algerian government and people in the management of natural hazard risk reduction started really with the destructive earthquakes, magnitude 7.4 of El Asnam earthquakes of October 10th, 1980, which caused more than 3,000 deaths and more than $3 billion worth of damage. Before 1980, just years after the independence, the government of Algeria put a lot of money in investment everywhere in Algeria. But we didn't take into account because at that time, the earthquakes wasn't a threat, wasn't taken as a threat because we didn't know. Everything was very vulnerable and we didn't know that earthquakes may stop the development. Or the management of risk has been continuously strengthened in reaction to the serious floods of Bab el-Oued, Algiers, that occurred on November 10th, 2001. The magnitude 6.8 devastating earthquakes of Boumerdès of May 21st, 2003, and the floods of Ghardaya of October 1st, 2008. These, after the 1980, these events, they marked the memory of the Algerian government and the Algerian populations. Then everybody in the society was asking, what is this? What to do with it? How we stop, how to reduce this natural phenomena with our, let's say, ignorance or unconscious or neglect will transform them into disasters. But because these are just natural phenomena, but we transform them to disasters. How to deal with them? How to manage them? Algeria National Plan for Disaster Risk Reduction and Management, as well as its legal, institutional, and regulatory framework, were particularly strengthened in 2003 on the basis of Boumerdès earthquake disaster experience, just in response and recovery. In response and recovery, because before Boumerdès earthquake, there was no prevention. We were just waiting for the disaster to occur, then we call the civil protection. It's good. It's an advantage to have a good civil protection, but the capacity or the resources of any civil protection, whatever it is, strong, but it cannot manage the response. The response is very difficult without any prevention. Then we started, the spirit of disaster management started to think about prevention and attenuation or mitigation before the disaster happened. Then the recovery, how to build back better This is the philosophy of building back better after the disaster, because it's like a circle. It's like a cycle of disaster. You have the disaster, you have the recovery, the response, the recovery, the prevention and mitigation, and again a disaster. Then we learn by testing, trial and error. This is for the geographical setting. I'm not be too long because many people know Algeria. It's in North Africa. We have borders in the Mediterranean Sea, very strategical position. Algeria is covering like 2,381,740 square kilometers. It is the largest country in Africa and the 10th largest country in the world. Covering such an immense stretch of land, Algeria is also a country of much diversity from the north to the south. It extends from the Mediterranean coastline and the relatively fertile mountainous areas of the north to the expansive sandy dunes of the Sahara deserts. We can see in the photo right down, we can see really the three regions characterizing Algerian territory. Up north, we can see the green. This is the north with the fertile, and we see the whole plateau for the agriculture and everything, and we see the desert in yellow. When we see desert, it's not in the meaning of desert, but this is a country with its resources, with people, with the culture, with customs, and with a lot of resources of gas and oil and other minerals. Risk profile. Algeria is, we know that Algeria is in the border of the two plates, for the two tectonic plates, the African plates and in the north, the Euro-Asian plates. They are in collusion. This collusion, they are creating in the south, like in Algeria, Morocco, and Tunisia, the Atlas Mountains, and creating in the up north in Europe, creating the Alps and the Pyrenees. Then from this collusion, which gives the creation of shallow earthquakes, very dangerous shallow earthquakes. Boumerdès one just 10 kilometers deep. Then the energy, maybe 90 or 80% of energy will reach the environment. That's very, very complicated. Compare them to Japanese earthquakes, which are very deep, 60, 70 kilometers, 100 kilometers, where the energy is attenuated before it reaches the environment, buildings, except the Kobe earthquakes, where the depth was between 10 and 15 kilometers, where we know the results, like 6,000 people died and more than $100 billion direct losses were recorded. Then Algeria is not exposed only to earthquakes, but Algeria is exposed to several natural hazards, such as floods, earthquakes, geological hazard, hydrometeorological risks, and forest fire. There are 14 of them classified by the United Nations UNDRR. There are also, because industrial and energy risk, radiological and nuclear hazard. This nuclear hazard comes from the nuclear power plant in Europe. There are 25. Then in case of an accident, we may have the nuclear cloud to the northern of Algeria. Risk relating to human health, like in COVID or other human risk. Risk related to animal and plant health, as well as atmospheric, soil, air, and water pollution. And disaster risk related to protest and demonstration, maybe some of them from the football stadium, as we all know. Floods and earthquakes are the most recurrent and devastating hazard causing significant loss of human lives and damage to properties and to the environment in the recent history. Before floods, because most of the people before the independence were living in the mountains, in rural areas where earthquakes and floods were not very big problems. Now, because of the development, because of the investment, because of the concrete put on the surface, floods are becoming surpassing earthquakes, and now they are recurrent and devastating. Then we should the risk from floods and earthquakes are not acceptable. We don't accept the level of risk from floods and earthquakes. Then we should manage them. How to manage them? How Algeria has been managing these risks. This is the earthquake hazard and tsunamis. Even though the tsunamis are very weak, but at least we are in the Mediterranean and the risk is here. In North Africa, Algeria, Morocco, and Tunisia have a relatively moderate seismicity. Yes, it's a moderate seismicity, like 4, 5, 6. And, you know, by time to time, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, we have a 7 or 6.8 or 7. Then the seismicity is moderate for all the Maghreb region. Despite the apparent tectonic activity of that thrust zone, which goes from Agadir in Morocco, going through Algeria to Tunisia, to the Gulf of Gabes in Tunisia, with a length of 2,300 kilometers and a width of 400 kilometers. This is like a thrust zone, compression, collision between the two plates. Earthquake hazard in Algeria, because of the development, as we see here, the number of buildings, earthquake hazard in Algeria poses an incessant threat to human life and the environment. Rapid urbanization, the development of critical infrastructures, such dams, bridges, and oil facilities across the coast, the littoral, the industrialization of cities, and the concentration of population in hazardous areas are all matters of growing concern in Algeria. We can see the photos of Boumerdès here. We can see the first photo at left, and we can see the damage or the rupture of this building in pancake collapse. This is the only thing. The disaster is not accepted. Collapse is not accepted in the seismic building codes all over the world. We don't accept this, but this is happening in Boumerdès. We can see the pancake collapse, and we can see also on the right the problem which we have. The same, if you see the problems, first of all, is the same height. It's like a phenomenon of resonance or something between the earthquake and the buildings. It means that microzonation has not been done before building these buildings. And also the soft story. We know that the story of the rez-de-chaussée or the first floor is generally reserved to garages or commerce. And that's make a soft story, and this is the disaster what happened. You can see that this building are very well, except the first floor who collapsed. Now we can, the tsunami, as I said, it's the risk is very weak, but regarding tsunamis, Algeria has experienced at least 3 moderate tsunamis, you know, during the, for example, 1856 in Djillali, there was one. The second one is the earthquake. It should be noted that the May 21st earthquake 2003, magnitude 6.8, in Boumerdès and surrounding area also caused a tsunami that spread to Spanish coast until Spain and Marseille in France. Then the problem is, as the earthquake occurred in Algeria, they received the wave in Europe, but we are afraid that there will be an earthquake in Europe, in Spain or southern France, and we will receive the wave of tsunami in Algeria. That's why we should be manage this risk. You can see here in the photo at the left, the Djillali Lagina beach before the earthquake. You can see the beach. It's about few meters, 3 or 4 meters, but you can see after the earthquakes an uplift of the continent, which pushed the water, a wave of water to the north, means to Spain and to Marseille in France. See, the danger exists. This time we were not lucky, because the earthquake occurred in Algeria, then the waves went to Europe, but next time maybe it will be the earthquake in Europe and we will receive the wave of tsunami in Algeria. That's why we should manage them. This is also the seismic activity of Algeria is monitored by the National Research Center for Astronomy, Astrophysics and Geophysics, CRAG, which is under the authority of the Ministry of Interior. The present Algerian seismic monitoring network is made up of 35 stations of the telemetry network and the 45 digital stations. Maybe it needs to be more. Catalogs of the Algerian seismicity, they show that the seismicity is distributed in the northern region of the country. It means that in the band between the coastal region, where there is this collision between the two plates, and the region of the southern flexure atlases, and from the Moroccan borders to the Tunisian borders. Then the risk of earthquakes is the same, because it's collision along the littoral. That the earthquake risk is the same, all in the littoral of Algeria. These catalogs indicate that several historically important, strong earthquakes occurred in Algeria, very few. That's why we said seismicity of Algeria is very moderate. Algiers 1716, Oran 1790, Blida 1825, Ténès 1891, Orléansville 1954, El Asnam, formerly Orléansville 1980, and Boumerdès 2003. This is the main big ones, the strongest one that occurred in Algeria. Another flood hazard, which now is preponderant, which every year we have these flood disasters, wherein before we didn't have it. Now we have it, because the rapid urbanization using concrete a lot on the surface, and we have this now in earlier times, before the development of Algeria, floods did not represent any threat to the government or population, as there was no real investment or development in the cities exposed, and most of the population was rural. Then there was no flood hazard. But during the 20s, where really the development can be apparent all over the territory of Algeria, floods, flash floods, and debris flow are becoming some of the most significant natural hazards affecting Algeria and its urban sites, causing considerable casualties, building damage, and destruction of roads and other public works and infrastructure. In the two photo left, you can see this is the expressway coming from El Biar to Bab El Oued. You can see the water and the buses and the cars full of people coming. And the same in the second photo, you can see the same expressway, but after the water has gone, you can see the buses and the disaster of cars. Because this expressway is a transit expressway from the west of Algiers to the east of Algiers and vice versa. Then many people go through this road all the day. And that's what happened early morning when people were transiting to going to work and to universities, and that was a very big disaster where 800 people lost their lives, and many destruction like schools, bridges, and were destroyed. Now in the right two photos we have up. This is the Ghardaya. This is the doors of the desert. The doors of the desert. Ghardaya, which is in the south, we can see these floods. The scope of the floods you can see by these cars, and down we can see also the scope of the floods in the city of Ghardaya, which is very, like 45 people lost their lives, but the economic losses were very large. Forest fire. Now with the climate change and many drivers of vulnerabilities of forests because of the climate change, and Algeria started to be very vulnerable to forest fires. The vulnerability is very high. Every year we record many forest fire, and unfortunately many people lose their lives. During the period 1825 to 2010, a total of 42,555 events swept 910,640 hectares, representing 20% of the total forest area, equal to 4 million hectares of forest. These two pictures show the Algeria forest fire just in 2022, where I think 90 or 100 people lost their lives in eastern of Algeria, like Souq Haras and the Wilaya across the border with Tunisia. And you can see the scope of the fire in this. And these forests are inhabited by people with their animals. Many people died, and they lost their families, they lost their animals, they lost their habitat, and they lost their, it's a forest, but sometimes it's more fruit trees and olive trees, and they lost all their capitals, and they lost everything, their livelihood. That's why this risk is not acceptable, and we should somehow to manage it. It's not acceptable, and we should now many strategies are being done and will be put to the public quickly. Algeria is affected by drought, climate change. That's a big problem now, because Algeria is affected by drought, desertification, and land degradation, not from only today, but from many years. That's why in 1970, the government decided to build what we call the Green Dam, the Great Green Dam, going from the border of Morocco to the border of Tunisia, for 1,400 kilometers long and about 20 kilometers wide. But this Green Dam has been abandoned because some invasive insect and herbs, they were stopped. But in December 2022, where Algeria allocated like $10 billion, I believe, for starting again this dam, this green dam, planting a forest across Algeria to stop the desertification and drought and land degradation, and also attenuate the climate change, and have like a sink of CO2 in southern or in the Sahara of Algeria. According to the sixth report of GIEC concerning Africa, published in March 2022, the average level of rainfall is considered one of the lowest in the Mediterranean basin. That's means that Algeria has to prepare for that. Due to climate change, yearly average rainfall declined by more than 30% since 1900s in the center and eastern parts, and about 40% in the western part. This means a lot, that reduction of production of agriculture, stress, lack or scarcity of water. This has to be taken into account for our strategy of development. The National Meteorological Office reports on an increasing frequency in torrential rainfall, especially in high plateaus, but also in the northern part, in the littoral, what we call, like extreme events, like flash floods, extreme events, which cannot be now, with the models we are using to predict these rainfalls, are not valid, cannot use them. Then we have these extreme events of torrential rainfall, which cause a lot of disaster in few minutes. We have to also try to manage them. In October 2018, the Ministry of Environment and Renewable Energies adopted the National Climate Plan. This is to manage all these, what was reported in the GIEC and the climate change, the activities for the development. Then the National Climate Change has its objectives, like 6 or 7 objectives, to reduce the CO2, for example, which is the first thing. Then Algeria can reduce 7% with its resources, paying for that, but it can reduce until 22% of the emission of CO2 before the industrialization. But if the developing countries pay for that. This is like a disaster recorded in Algeria based on the end date from 1954 to 2021. See the floods, the earthquakes, the storms, extreme temperature, forest fire, insect invasion, epidemics, landslides, and the drought. We have the number of deaths, the number of persons affected, and the economic losses in thousands of US dollars. Now we can see the evolution, what we have done, how we did it, what was the progress of natural hazard governance. For sure, we didn't start in one go. It was, by a progression, gradually, in response to a number of major disasters that have struck the country. Algeria has adopted a modern normative framework for disaster risk management, giving high priority to prevention. Now, from the Boumerdès earthquake, we give priority to prevention, because for response, we lose a lot of our resources. The civil protection, which is the core of disaster management, since the independence, but what was too small and not very capable to do things. The Civil Protection Corps has undergone different phases in the evolution of its organization and the missions assigned to it in relation to the progress of the country's socio-economic development. Then the civil protection has undergone, in reorganizing itself according to the progress of the socio-economic and development of the country. This reorganization, I'm presenting this because it was the core until recently, and it still is the core for disaster management, for response. This reorganization was completed in 1976 by the replacement of the former National Civil Protection Service, which was under the authority of the municipalities, and the creation of the General Directorate under the authority of the Ministry of Interior, which is very important. It's a General Directorate. Since then, the Directorate General of Civil Protection has two directorates. A technical one, Technical Directorate for Operational Action in the field, and the second one is for administrative duties, then it's for studies and analysis and means. In Algeria, as I have said, as unbelievable as it may seem, before the last earthquake of Al-Asnam, actually Shilif, which occurred on 10th of October 1980, the government and the population as a whole did not consider earthquakes as a threat. Why? Because there was no investment, no development. Most of the people were living in rural areas before 1980, just after the independence. I continue on the evolution of natural hazard governance. Among other government measures, the first thought on the coverage of natural hazard, how to cover them, how to pay, was well advanced during this period and promulgated by the law 1807 of August 9, 1980, related to insurance. The first thing, insurance, just a few months before the October 10th, 1980 Al-Asnam earthquake. We started to think, because during this period, there were some studies from Stanford University, from Professor Shah, to try to understand the earthquake phenomena in Algeria. And there was some rising awareness of the government at that time. In 1995, another ordinance on January 25th, 1995, related to insurance, again, has come to strengthen the legal framework by modifying the mode of covering risk, natural disaster. Now we put natural disaster where there is nothing called natural disaster. It's not natural disaster, natural phenomena. And this, by expanding the branches likely to take care of them, that is to say, without being limited to fire contract. Before it was just fire. Now they included in these natural disasters. The ordinance provides losses and damage resulting from events of natural disasters, such as earthquakes, floods, tidal waves, like tsunami, we call tidal waves, storm, landslide, and other disasters are covered with this insurance. And in 2003, promulgation of ordinance of August 26, 2003, which made compulsory, mandatory, the insurance against the risk of natural hazard. And its implementing regulation was published in 2004. This is a compulsory for insurance for everybody living in Algeria. Now I will just talk about the triggers, earthquakes and flood disaster as policy triggers. We just progressed in this governance by triggers, by events, by disasters. The national policy on major hazard prevention and disaster management that has been implemented includes a set of rules and arrangements that support the achievement of the objectives assigned by the public authorities, but have also been aligned to global HUGO and Sendai frameworks for disaster risk reduction. The legislation framework, the current legislation framework consisting of a set of laws and regulation adopted by the government since 1985, is continuously and gradually strengthened. It was a decree just after the earthquake of Al-Asnam 1980. The first decree was published on August 25th, 1985, laying down the conditions and arrangement for the implementation of disaster recovery and relief, because we were concerned by a response, relief and recovery. And the second decree, it was published at the same time, August 25th, 1985. This one was talking just about prevention, where the awareness was rising to the government at that time about prevention, which is very important. They published this decree. Another decree published in December 15, 1990, on the organization and functioning of the Fund for Natural Disasters and Major Technological Risk. Then at that time, they had this decree for having a fund, which exists until now, bigger fund for natural disaster and helping in the recovery and the relief, but unfortunately not for prevention. This fund is here, but it's used for recovery and response. We have also a law in 2001 related to territorial development and sustainable development, and among others, the protection of territories and population against risk related to natural hazard. This 2001, this law is the integration of DRR and DRM for the territorial development and sustainable development, integration of disaster risk reduction and disaster risk management. Already in 2001, we had this law, which started to work with it. Now we have another law, 2003, related to environment protection in the context of sustainable development. Here also, for this environment protection, also we integrated disaster risk reduction and disaster risk management, reducing the vulnerabilities, etc. Another ordinance of 2000 in August 2003, just after the Boumerdès earthquake, on the obligation to ensure natural hazards and compensate the victims. Compensation is in the Constitution. Any owner, what says this law, this ordinance, any owner, natural or legal person, excuse me, any owner, natural or legal person is required to take out a damage insurance contract guaranteeing built property and or commercial installation and their contents, container and contained, against the effects of natural disasters. This is very important as a law for the insurance. Now the decree of 2004, this is also clarifying things, identifying the natural events covered by the obligation of insurance. Then people who are confused about what natural event, obligation of insurance for the effect of natural disasters and setting the procedure for declaring the state of natural disaster. This is also very important to know when we declare by law, we declare the state of natural disaster and what follows. Now there is another decree in June 24, 2004. This is what we experienced in the past disaster, communication. There is a communication of risk, but also there is a risk of communication if you don't have a good strategy of communication. Creation of a national commission of communication related to natural and technological major risk. The Commission's mission is to define and propose to the government the national communication strategy related to major natural and technological risk and to implement it. This commission is working and proposing how to communicate with the population and between the different organizations and stakeholders. Now we have a law in August 14, 2004, just after the Boumerdès earthquake, related to land management and urban planning, modifying and supplementing the law of December 1st, 1990, related to land management and urban planning. Here it's more urban planning. Look what was modified in that law. First, immediate demolition of all new constructions without legal permit, immediate demolition. And the second, compulsory introduction, in addition to architectural layout signed by an architect, of designed structural plans signed by a structural engineer or an earthquake engineer, where before there was the architect was enough to give the architectural layout. But now we need an earthquake engineer to sign the layout, the structural plans, I mean concrete and steel. And now we arrived in December 2004 with a law we called 0420 of 25 December 24 on the prevention of major risk and disaster management in the context of sustainable development. This law constitutes the most important law concerning disaster risk reduction and management. From that time, from that law, a lot of things has been done. For example, this law is based on the 5 principles detailed in its Article 8. Precaution, simultaneity, preventive action by priority at the source, integration of new techniques and technologies, participation of the stakeholders, civil society, and everything. The core of this new prevention system is constituted by the creation of a general prevention plan for each of the natural major risks. And for each major risks, we have a prevention plan for all over the country. Then we have for earthquakes, for flood, for desertification, for forest fire, for landslides, for all the major risks. We have a general prevention plan, how to deal with this major risk all over the country. Now, in 2009, there was a law related to the general rules for the prevention of fire and panic risks, because panic were experienced by the population and the governments and the organization and institutions. Then there was a law to clarify the general rules for the prevention of fire and panic. In 2010, also this is a good date because this law in June 29th, 2010, it's approving the National Spatial Planning Scheme, SNAP, Schéma National de l'Aménagement du Territoire, which takes a disaster risk reduction into account in development plans and strategies through its prescriptions. This is how to develop the country, but taking into account the disaster risk reduction. This is general for all the country. And now they are revising it, they are updating, taking also account of the climate change into this National Spatial Planning Scheme. Then for the maybe 2040 or 2040 or 2050. There was also a decree very important for coordination and evaluation, because we have civil protection, we have department, ministry department, but we don't have any coordination. The decree came on May 22nd, 2011, the establishment of a national delegation of major risk, DNRM, Délégation Nationale au Risque Majeur, by according to item 68 of the law, this law, which includes the intersectoral committee on missions, organization, and functioning of the DNRM. Its main missions are coordination and evaluation. Coordination and evaluation. Then in 2019, there was a decree, executive decree, setting the terms for the development and management of emergency organization plans, what we call ORSEC, Organisation des Plans de Secours. We have that for the national ORSEC, Wilaya ORSEC, and municipality ORSEC. Then we have this plan, including all the actors of disaster risk reduction, the players of the response and the recovery. Then the implementation, how we implement this national natural hazard governance. Since the adoption of the Law 0420, December 25th, 2004, notable progress has been made, for example, by strengthening the institutional framework and the gradual enrichment of legal and regulatory frameworks, creating a national delegation for major risks, significant increase in the number and capacity of research institutions and intervention organizations, as well as better involvement of the scientific community as a whole. Setting up monitoring and following up structures at the level of various ministerial departments and other institutions and organizations in relation to the disaster risk reduction. Capitalization of valuable experience gained by managing a variety of past disasters. This is also documentation for past to learn from experience. Also, what has been done as implementation of the law, appointment of a delegate for each wilaya, prefecture or province, to animate and coordinate the work and intersectoral committees for disaster risk management. Again, capacity building through the appointment of a delegate for each baladia, and there are 1,541 baladia or municipality in Algeria. Then for each one, there was appointment of a delegate to lead and coordinate the work of intersectoral committee for disaster risk management at the baladia level, at the municipality level. Establishment of a special training program in the field of disaster risk reduction and disaster risk management for disaster managers responsible at the ministry departments at all decision-making levels. A training program. Increase in public awareness through important media coverage around the natural hazard, mainly floods, earthquakes, and forest fires, has led to an increasing interest of the civil society as a whole. Establishment of a mandatory catastrophe insurance scheme called CatNat. Now I'm going to quickly, because I'm running out of time, main research organization supporting hazard governance. We have the CGS, the National Center for Applied Research in Earthquake Engineering, which was created in 1985, and it's responsible for the seismic building code, for establishing the seismic building code since 1985 or before it was created. They're working on seismic building code until now. They're updating it each time when there is a strong earthquake, a disaster, or by research in the laboratory. They have a shaking table, 6x6 and 6 degrees of freedom, which is very important for research in earthquake engineering. We have CRANC, National Center for Astronomy, Astrophysics, and Geophysics. This is for monitoring for the seismicity of Algeria. We have CNIRIB, National Center for Studies Integrated Research of Building, everything which consider the materials and everything for buildings was created in 2003. We have the CTC, an important organism. It's a national organization under Organization of Technical Control of the Construction, created under the authority of Ministry of Habitat in 1971, which control all the layout, the construction on the field before what it was created just for government. This is for government. But since the earthquake of Boumerdès, now it controls the government and the private sector. The NRH, National Agency for Hydraulic Resources, under the Ministry of Water Resources, with a scientific and technical vocation. This is everything which is the hydraulic resources, and the data and the stations are controlled by NRH. We have now this, of course, forest fire. We have the DGF, General Directorate for Forest, under the Ministry of Agriculture, for the management of forests was created in 1995. Now they're working on prevention, trying to manage the forest for prevention. And of course, we have all the universities and higher education institutions. Several universities of the country, and they are 100, are contributing to education, training, and research in disaster risk reduction. We have the AZAL, Algerian Special Agency, created in 2002 as an instrument to design and implementation of the national policy for the promotion and development of space activity. We have ONM, National Office of Meteorology, which provides actual status and future behavior of the weather and climate information to the stakeholders concerned. We have INCC with the National Agency for Climate Change that promotes the integration of climate change issues into all development plans and contribute to the protection of the environment, is playing a good role in the next SNAPs. We have also the CSTRA, which is for the Research Center for Scientific and Technical Research on Arid Region, created in 1991, and undertakes and participate in any multidisciplinary research related to arid region, and Algeria is arid and semi-arid. It has established the scientific and technical database on the arid region and ensures treatment, conservation, and dissemination of information about this region. They are playing good in climate change adaptation with all these data they have. Now the database they have, they're using it for climate change adaptation in these arid and semi-arid regions. For conclusion, I would say as a conclusion, the current level of governance of natural hazard in Algeria is the result of a long history with extensive experience from independence to present. It has been influenced by historical development, economic, cultural, religious, and political conditions all over this time. Progress made is also due to the culture of solidarity of the population. The Algerian population is known for its resilience, its solidarity with disaster victims, and its experience in recovering and rebuilding their communities after any kind of disaster. I think this resilience and this solidarity has come from the Algerian revolution of liberation of Algeria. The centralized political system in Algeria and its organization have played a considerable role in disaster risk reduction and made it easier to implement the decision made at the top levels by instructing the lower levels in the administration to implement the decision made at the top. Yes, this is the advantage of the centralized political system, which is in Algeria. I think it has a lot of advantages for disaster risk management and disaster risk reduction. However, it should be clear that for better and effective natural hazard governance, there is a need for more capacity building and also capability building. Not only capacity, because capacity is resources, but capability is how to use the resources, how to use them. Some organizations, they have the resources, but they don't have the capability to use them. Then we need for more capacity and capability building, public awareness, involvement, and ownership. Ownership is very important of all stakeholders at all levels in the country. And thank you very much for your attention. I hope I gave some summary of the natural hazard governance in Algeria.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor Djillali Benouar, for the very insightful lecture. You really covered the topic from the base to the top, and we really need it. this insight from an expert, and so that we can understand the different rules and regulations in Algeria. And it's also very important that you covered the problem of not only earthquakes but natural hazard in general. As you mentioned, we are facing a new wave of natural hazards due to the climate change and fires, and we really need to be aware of the regulations in our country. So thank you again for the very insightful lecture. I would like to go back to our audience, and we remind our audience that you can ask your questions or comments in the comment sections, and we will pick a few questions from the audience that I can see. We have many people asking and saying hi in the comments. So let me pick a few questions here. I will pick a first question from Facebook. Thank you very much for the lecture. Are there any regulations supporting local communities to play a role on quick response after an earthquake? Yeah, I think this is something related to what you mentioned in the conclusion, that Algerian communities, local communities, are very well strengthened due to the war. But now, so are there any local any rules or regulations mentioning the role of local communities in this perspective?
Yes, I know. Just to say that that in most of the local municipalities, 1541. There is a service of civil protection, and that there is a technical service in each municipality, and these people are used to disasters. Some of them are trained, some of not. But now, with this publication of 0420 law, we have a delegate at each municipality with the local authorities to deal with disaster risk reduction and disaster risk management along the year. Now we have something in it, a core in each baladia or municipality.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your answer. We remind our audience that we are live and you can ask your questions or comments in the comment section. We will pick another question this time from YouTube, from Amin bin Mukhtar. Thank you very much for the valuable presentation. How to explain, Professor, that Algeria continues to have considerable forest fire despite the availability of legal mechanism? Where to start to mitigate the effects of these fires and limit their numbers?
Yes, this is a very good question. But we have to say that forest fires is also a hazard. What is a hazard? A hazard it comes from the Arabic word zar. It's inversed. And the zar, what is a zar? A zar is a dice. And the dice, when you throw it, you never know what's going to be the result. There is uncertainties. We cannot prevent 100% the forest fire. Whatever we do, whatever is the legislation, whatever is the means, whatever is the resources, but there is uncertainty. This is what scientists would like to reduce. Uncertainties, what we call as risk. But risk is uncertainty. We have to deal with uncertainty. And then I believe with learning, because there are many drivers of vulnerability, we don't know. Now, see, Mohammed, we have the known knowns. That's easy to work with. We have the knowns, unknowns. On this, we make research. But the problem is that we have unknowns. Things we don't know that we don't know. That's the big problem with the forest fires and any other hazard. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your answer, Professor. We will pick another question this time. I will remind our audience that you can ask your questions and comments in the comment section. I will pick another one from LinkedIn, this time in French language, but I'll try to translate it. Nous sommes à la porte de 2023. Tout doit être digitalisé, même la gestion des catastrophes naturelles. D'où l'urgence d'intégrer le BIM en Algérie, des bureaux d'études jusqu'au pouvoir public. So I will just quickly translate this into English. So we are at the door of 2023 and we really need to go to digital to help us on the natural disaster. I think Professor Benouar already mentioned digital at the beginning of this lecture. So maybe one word on how can we use maybe this advantage on using digital to help us on mitigate our natural hazard governance.
Yes, I think there is now a ministry of digitalization, and digitalization is everywhere in all the ministry departments. Then for sure the DNRM, the National Delegation for Major Risk, will digitalize the natural hazard management. We arrive to that. But we are in the process. Gradually, we are going gradually in the digitalization, and we have to. This is a must, I believe.
Thank you very much, Professor. We will pick another question from let me just see. We have so many questions, and everybody's thanking you for your very interesting presentation. So we'll pick another one from Facebook from Dr. Saeed Maouch. Thank you, Professor. It's not a question, but just a comment. I wonder if we have really done anything tangible since 1980 except rescue during and help after all, and especially know how to count our losses, unfortunately. Apart from the technological risk accidentology, our ancestors knew how to face it. It is time, in my opinion, to focus on the population. We must now teach all these risks and at all level of education. Maybe one word, Professor, since you are a professor at university, on how can we take this risk mindset to the public. I remind everyone that this webinar series is part of it. We are trying to make work on the population on awareness, and how can we transmit the message to the people through inviting experts online. So maybe one word about this, Professor Benouar.
Yes, thank you very much, Said, for this question. I know you know the solution, but you asked the question anyway. Yes, you know, the what we call capacity building or reinforcement of resilience, reinforcement of skills. We are doing that, you know, every day in the universities, and we're trying. There is education, formal and informal education. For formal education in schools and universities, and informal is done by the Croissant Rouge, the Algerian Red Crescent, and the Civil Protection. They have done many programs for that. But we need to be continuous, because this education should be continuous to raise awareness of the population, how to do during, before, during, and after the disaster. This is very important. The population, civil society is very important to implicate it, to involve it in disaster risk management. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your comment, Professor. We'll pick another question from Facebook. This one probably the last one, because we are running out of time. Great presentation. Any thought on how to deal with desertification in the south?
Yes, I think the Algerian government in 1970, they were aware of the problem. Then desertification is advancing. They tried to stop it and making some new ecosystem. They tried to build this, what we call the Great Green Dam. It's like a forest of 1,400 kilometers east from east to west and 20 kilometers wide. But unfortunately, there were some problems with insects and bad herbs and invasive herbs, and they stopped it after a few years, like 5 or 6 years. But now they are doing it again in December 2022. I think they allocated like $10 billion or dinar to start again to this dam to stop desertification.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your answer, Professor Djillali Benouar. So with that said, I will not hold you longer. Everybody is thanking you for the great presentation. I see many comments and many appreciations in the comments, but we are running out of time. We finished 1 hour. So I would like to thank you again very much for the very, very insightful presentation today. It was very important for us to understand the regulations and the national hazard governance in our country. I remind our audience that this presentation was basically a paper, a journal paper that was published by Professor Benouar. And when I've been through the paper, I kindly asked him to do the presentation. So you can find more details on the paper. We can send you the paper later on the link. Our team will share it with you so that you can access it, hopefully. So with that said, we will thank Professor Benouar for his time and for her dedication to share his expertise with us. And I remind our audience that we will have another webinar on December. Probably it will be the last of our webinar series. So it will be a little bit of 2 years doing this webinar series, and probably we will start another initiative on how we can communicate and increase the earthquake hazard to the population. We thank our audience for the questions. So with that said, thank you everyone. Thank you very much for attending our webinar, and looking forward to see you in another webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you for invitation, and thank you for your attention. Thank you. Next time.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you.
Shukran. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.